John Tamny joins me now for more on the trade tariffs. He's the editor of Real Clear Markets and an editor with Forbes Magazine. Real Clear Markets, is there a real clear strategy here? I guess the old expression is misery loves company, so I guess China doesn't feel as picked on now. The trade tariff volleys are going out to a number of different corners of the world. How does this impact China, or does it?
It only impacts China if China reacts as foolishly as the United States has been acting. The country that stays liberal in terms of trade, that keeps its markets open, always wins. And so even if the U.S. were to impose massive tariffs on Chinese goods, that doesn't take away from the genius of the division of labor and comparative advantage. China should remain open as possible and in fact lower tariffs to U.S. goods, because its people will benefit, and by definition, so will its economy benefit if it stays open.
Here's a headline I found from a newspaper article. This was back in February. Mexico looks to boost trade with China as NAFTA talks falter. Are we going to see more of that? I mean, are some of these different countries that are kind of taking it on the chin, might they look towards China for more deals with them?
I hope so. I hope what happens is that the U.S. sees that just because it wants to take a step backward and injure not just its people, but the most important companies in all of the U.S. who have major gains to be had from trading with China. If the U.S. wants to take a step back in time, other countries will step in and take advantage of the genius of trade. Free trade isn't about destroying jobs. All it is about people specializing in what they do best. The countries that stay open to foreign trade, by definition, prosper. That's why the U.S. is the richest country in the world. If the U.S. moves against it, we'll be poor. Other countries shouldn't follow suit.
What about the Trump team? And I heard another one of his former advisors on the air the other day saying, look, you know, all these countries say free trade, but they're just saying it. They put up all these barriers to the United States, as though the United States is this victim. Do they have a point to us, in a sense?
I don't think they do. Let's remember, to produce is to express a desire to import. Even if China does have higher tariffs on U.S. goods than the U.S. has on China, that's just a negative about China. The U.S. should not add insult to injury by harming its people, by raising the cost of everything that they're importing, but also harming its companies. Let's not forget that Apple, the most valuable U.S. company, sells 20% of its iPhones in China. Boeing sells 1/4 of its planes in China. GM sold in the first quarter more cars in China than it did in all of North America. There are more Starbucks, double the number of Starbucks in Shanghai than there are in New York City. Why on earth would the U.S. try to generate a trade war with such an important economy for its companies to sell to?
There are a lot of companies here in the United States who want to get into China. To your point, in Starbucks, you can find a ton of them there. I have in the past when I've been there. Wilbur Ross, on his way to China, how does this affect the backdrop for those talks? He's supposed to be going and trying to negotiate something with China. How does this impact that in any way, or does it?
I get the feeling that probably the talk inside the Trump administration is that we're going to set all these demands, we're going to pull out, and hopefully the Chinese will then react by lowering barriers to foreign goods. I don't like that kind of strategy. Again, to produce is to express a desire to import. We don't need to force the Chinese to open their markets. Their people, by virtue of producing so much for the U.S., are expressing a desire to have open markets. We don't need government to do it. U.S. companies don't need government to do it. Ultimately, China will do what's right for its people. Its people are producing wealth. They're going to want to import it.
John Tamny, thanks so much for coming in, offering your insights.
Thanks for having me.